Audio working this time. Yeah, so anyone who, we didn't have any audio from last week's video, so
That's a bummer.
yeah, I have to go back and re-record. That's always fun. Well, welcome back to the Thursday evening lecture. We're continuing our coverage of the Vimalakirit Sutra. So we're starting this week on the second chapter, which is entitled Skillful Means. So I think over the course of 4 months or so, we went over the first chapter, including the introduction and kind of the background and overview of the sutra. So now we're moving on to finally introducing the protagonist of our story, Vimalakirti. So it's said that this chapter was actually added later by Ananda. So the sutra, to some degree, is spoken by the Buddha and is then later recalled by the disciples who were present. And during that process, Ananda realized it's probably good to give an introduction as to who Vimalakirti is and why we should be interested. So this was a background portion of the recollection of the preaching of the sutra, not a portion that's directly spoken. So again, a little bit unusual because we have these two scenes going on simultaneously, but very helpful, I think, to future readers or anyone who's going to study this particular teaching to have that background portion added. So not always necessary, because generally other sutras, if you read them, everyone's together at the same time, and there's background as to who they are and why they're there. This one's a little bit unusual. So we have this section. And as you can tell, if you have either the PDF or the written text, it's only a few pages, so it's probably one of the shortest sections. So it's just some background about Vimalakirti. Probably less necessary for people at the time, or close in time, they would have probably known of him, just like many of the disciples were, as we'll see, knew of him, but helpful for us. So that's where we'll start. So I don't think this section will take as long as the previous chapter, so we'll get through it. So the last chapter was entitled Buddha Lands. Why? So that portion of the teaching is really focused on our world, our existence as Shakyamuni's Pure Land, so that we actually do live in a Pure Land. It's just not something that we see. So in many ways, this is a very esoteric perspective, that there's this sort of two layers, one that we see and the one that if you look deeper, if you look through the eyes of wisdom, that you see. So then the question is, well, how do we see that world? So of course, a lot of Buddhist teaching is focused on methods, but this one is, or I guess I should say, in the Western perspective, sometimes we expect, we ask a question, well, how do I see that? And we expect, first you do this, this, and this, and that explanation very logically leads us to an understanding where we say, oh, okay, I see how that's done. And the Dharma is a little bit different. This teaching is a little bit different. So there are methods, but it's looking at it with our average day-to-day perception, or the same perception that we bring to the study of any kind of academic thing or putting together IKEA furniture. It doesn't equal the same, okay, well, I see that and I see the diagram and this is the finished product. It's not quite as clear-cut. So there is a requirement that the mind be worked on first, that there's preparation, and that through that preparation we transform the mind into kind of a new instrument that's then able to apprehend these truths. So that intermediate portion sometimes is missed. People think, okay, I sit down and if I sit this way, or I hold my body in this way, and I take 20,000 breaths, then I've got it. Sometimes we don't see that connection. So I tried to think of what's this like, and so if you think of like an M.C. Escher drawing, you have stairways going this way and that way. There's this optical illusion happening in the painting. Initially, we see it and we see one aspect, and then we see maybe there's multi-dimensional stairways going nowhere, or rivers flowing that appear to be waterfalls, but they float back on themselves. You see it one way, and then suddenly something in your mind shifts, and you see it differently. So to explain that shift, I don't think anyone can truly explain how that shift happens or when it happens. Or if you see paintings where initially you see one image, and then your eyes focus slightly differently, and you see actually it's a conglomeration of multiple smaller images. Or one of my favorites is a picture, you can't tell if the man is looking to the right or looking straight ahead. There's this sort of this cutout. What causes that shift in the mind back and forth? That's largely unexplainable. It happened. We've probably all had the experience, but something like that happens through this practice, that we begin to see things differently. Something shifts, and you see the world differently. You see things with a different type of wisdom or different type of insight, and that, in many respects, is kind of what the first chapter is. That this teaching is leading you to see the world around you after a shift occurs. And the method is, how do you prepare the mind to make that shift, and then afterwards, what is that shift like, and explain the difference between the two. But to say exactly when that's going to happen for you, in what circumstance, that's very hard to say. So I think oftentimes people don't quite understand. They're bringing just a different understanding or perspective to the teaching, and expecting a very concrete change. And sometimes that change, that shift, is accompanied by a tremendous amount of emotional turmoil, upheaval. It can be very scary. You get very close to some realization, and your sense of self starts to shift, and that's scary. And so people go running away. They go running back from the breach. So I think that's one side. So the next chapter, second chapter, Skillful Means, is how does the Bodhisattva lead people to that realization? What are the methods that are employed? So again, the methods are discussed. Exactly when the shift happens for the people who are being transformed or led to that realization, it's going to depend on each individual. There's no, after X number of mantra recitations, you absolutely will have the shift. It's always going to be different for all of us. So we're going to have to do our own slight experimentation to find when that happens. So this chapter specifically is how Vimalakirti guides people. So we have a list of Vimalakirti's virtues. So this may seem familiar from the first chapter. We're looking at lists of virtues. But in the same way, we're supposed to learn something from the list, not just say what a great guy he is, and he's got 18 great virtues. It's not like what do the stars on Vimalakirti's flag represent? Oh, those are his 18 virtues. Let me tell you all about. So it has more to do with us learning about how those virtues are actually skills that he uses to transform people. So that's why we study it. So the first question, why is this chapter here? Naturally, we will ask, well, who the heck is Vimalakirti, and why should we care? So now this is the answer. So this chapter starts off. At that time, there was within this great city of Vaisali an elder named Vimalakirti. He had already made offerings to innumerable Buddhas, deeply planting the foundation of goodness. He had attained forbearance of the non-arising of dharmas, and his eloquence was unhindered. He deported in the numinous penetrations and had achieved all the dharanis. Don't worry, we'll come back to some of these words that are very archaic in English that we no longer use. He had attained fearlessness and had subjugated the troubling vengeance of the Maras. Entering into all the gates of profound Dharma, he was excellent at the perfection of wisdom. Having penetrated skillful means, his great vows had been accomplished. Understanding the tendencies of the minds of sentient beings, he was also able to discriminate between those of sharp and dull faculties. Long a practitioner of the path of Buddhahood, his mind was already pure, and he was definitely dedicated to the Mahayana. He considered well the activities of the realms of existence, and residing in the deportment of the Buddha, his mind was great as the ocean. The Buddhas praised him as their disciple, and the Indras, Brahmas, and world lords, heavenly kings, revered him. Okay, so it's a long introductory paragraph. So there are about 12 or 14 of these introductory or sections in this chapter. So we'll go through, but as a traditional method, we'll try to go line by line without making it too tedious. But there's actually a lot of detail in here regarding how to practice and what we should be doing, not just what Vimalakirti does. So we'll take the first section. So there's 2 points here. Vimalakirti's virtues are introduced. So he's a householder, yet he possesses great wisdom and insight. So we see this appearing, seemingly contradictory pictures of someone. And then secondarily, we're told from the start that long before now, he had laid the groundwork for his current being, his incarnation. So Vimalakirti didn't just wake up one day with great, tremendous wisdom. It's implying here that in many, many lifetimes past, he's put in a tremendous amount of work. He's studied with teachers, he's practiced, and now he's returned. In fact, already an enlightened being, but he manifests as a householder. So this is sort of the background. So why is that? It is a more accessible person for us to learn from than sometimes when the descriptions of the Buddha are there. If we learn about the life of the Buddha, sometimes we can say, well, I can identify when he was the prince in the palace. Sure, I have a big house, or I have a nice car, like his chariot. But when he goes out and he's the monk, we may say, well, that's difficult to explain or understand. What should we take from the teaching? So here now we have someone in the visage or the guise of a layperson who is manifesting the same virtues. And so how and when those are manifested and how he leads people to realization is different than what we've seen with the Buddhas or Bodhisattvas, even though actually he's probably a Bodhisattva in disguise. So this is where we start. So next we have a series of praises. So there are 6, even though it may not have been obvious, there are 6 here that we're going to go through. So first, he had good roots. So he had deeply planted the foundation of goodness in the past. So this is what he's cultivated. So our behaviors and actions, when it's talking about his virtues, it's not a moralistic, do this, don't do that. As we talked about earlier, it's not a social control perspective. It is very much a, what is really the cause of the things that we say are suffering, or, I don't know, look on social media, what kind of things are people bemoaning? And if we really look inside, it has a lot to do with our perception. How we internalize it has a lot to do with thinking either this situation will last forever, or this situation, can't change soon enough, and I can't wait till the next. So we're jumping around rather than seeing kind of this continuous flow. So a lot of things are how we look at them. So that's the first one. How our actions actually affect us, how they either work to settle our minds or upset our minds. So that's the first. So it says he has an understanding of emptiness. So understanding here is probably the wrong concept. It implies kind of this intellectual understanding. Really, it's like he has very deep insight into the non-arising of things. So he sees that things are constantly, flowing. So if you're not happy with the current moment, Vimalakirti is very adept at just seeing, this is something that's passing. You can see a time when things were different and a time when they're going to be different again. So it won't always be this way. So that perspective is hard to bring to every situation. If we have a very strong emotional response to something, someone gives us this kind of simplistic, well, it'll pass, it may make us angry. In fact, so this is definitely an insight It's not an intellectual, like, oh, okay. Oh, it'll pass? Okay, no problem. I'll stop crying. No. It's definitely a deep insight. So that's the first section. And then there's this comment here that he has unhindered eloquence. So this is an area of the English that is, we get short shrift, so to speak, because this is one of those canned Buddhist concepts that has no explanation in the English. So unhindered eloquence in Chinese is actually 4 abilities of unhindered articulation. And so these 4 are things that teachers of the Dharma aspire to, but also Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have no problem getting. So what are the 4? So the first one is having no mistake in the teaching. So you give a teaching and there's no mistakes. So I apologize, I make mistakes. So I have yet to attain the 4 unhindered eloquences, but this also, if you're unhindered, it means you have no hesitation, no fear. If someone asks instantly, you're able to provide the teaching. So it's a type of wisdom where, because of your deep understanding of the Buddhist teaching, your answers are unimpeded. Just naturally you can discuss and answer people's questions. The second one is to be unobstructed with regard to the content and meaning of the teaching. So not only can you regurgitate the teaching, there are a lot of people who memorize, right? They've memorized a particular text, but if you ask them the meaning, maybe they don't know. So I remember when I was in school, I had a professor who told us about a student she had who had a photographic memory, and she would ask a question in class, and he would say, "What page was that on?" And she'd give the page, and he would start reciting from memory, right? Literally a photographic memory, but he had to actually recall it as a picture, so he needed the page number, right? And I thought, oh, it is true, I guess, So this has been a modern theory of a lot of the Buddha's disciples. How do we get all the sutras in such a, dialogue format? And one speculation is that, they had either developed that level of memory, or maybe some of them even had it naturally, or they could have that kind of level of perfect recall of the teaching. So we get these, very detailed dialogues. So initially I thought, like, oh, interesting theory. And then here I am, face to face with a professor who said they had to rewrite all their exams and everything because the student, literally their brain was like a, camera. So not completely unheard of, but useful only to a degree. If you can only recall it, but you can't explain it, or you don't understand it, then maybe not completely useful. So the second of the unobstructed eloquences is unobstructed in the knowledge or the meaning. So there's no confusion as to the meaning of what you know. I ought to be so lucky. The third one is unhindered speech. So that is understanding in all languages. So does that mean that the Bodhisattva is fluent in every language? They're the perfect UN employee. They can fluently translate. I think partially that's true, but also partially there's every language has a word for red, but everyone understands red. You don't have to explain the color red every time you learn a new language. So you learn the word for it, but you already understand the concept. So there's an underlying concept or meaning behind language. Language is a symbolic tool. So I think it is possible, if you have pets, sometimes you know what your pet wants. Do you speak your pet's language? Not exactly. But there is sort of an unhindered ability, level of understanding. So I think that's part of it. A deeper understanding is unhindered discrimination, like being able to really, you don't get to the point where you're stuck in the foreign country just talking louder, expecting that to translate your words. If you
American.
Yeah, the ugly American traveler. If you listen long enough and put in a little bit of time, oftentimes you can get the meaning even if you don't speak the language. So I think a lot of that is just patience, actually. And the fourth is unhindered ease and explanation. So there's a freedom, actually here there's a joy in teaching. Right? So someone asks you a question. Sometimes you ask a question and you might know the answer, but someone says, well, can you explain how that relates to this? And it's stressful. You might be able to do it, but it's a little stressful. You see this often on news talk shows. Someone is being put on the spot and it's stressful. This is why I like to watch the Prime Minister's question hour in the UK. They're much better at answering, and it gets very interesting. But here it's not a struggle, it's effortless, but it's also joyful. It's something that the teacher, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha, takes joy in doing. And if you have that image of it being, joyful, then it's naturally effortless, right? If you enjoy it. So completely different. So these are the
unhindered ease of what?
Oh, of ease and explanation. In Chinese, it's the 四无碍辩, the 4 unhindered eloquences, articulations, rhetorical formula. So, a bunch of different ways you can translate that. So that's what we lose out on in the English translation. So the second one, let's see here. It says he has disported in the numinous penetrations and has achieved all the dharanis. Disported. So when's the last time you used disported in a sentence? Disported in the numinous penetrations. So he has unrestrained enjoyment. Right? Disported. So we are sporting in the numinous penetrations. What are the numinous penetrations? They are the supernatural powers that come with meditation or yogic or ascetic practice. So these are considered natural emanations of, or natural capabilities of people. And we see this throughout all cultures, right? There's a belief in extrasensory perceptions of some sort. In Chinese, the Shentong, they are considered, these various things. So here, Vimalakirti, sports in psychic powers, right? This is, I wonder what kind of sporting jacket you wear. I wonder if REI has a section of disporting in numinous penetrations.
Apparently it's a white robe.
Yes. It's a you go into the sporting goods store. So what do you play? Oh, I disport in numinous penetrations. So these are, again, considered natural, and there's different types depending on, who you are, what you do, what your level of explanation are. If you're an arhat, if you are a sage, there's considered different ones. We've gone over them before, but these were just, I think, most important is that they're considered just natural. These things just happen. They come up. So not something to chase after, but also not something to, dismiss out of hand. So for me, I always think, whether we have that experience or not, I find it interesting that throughout the world, these are something that human cultures all have some stories about. So sometimes I wonder. It's very interesting. If you're were or used to be, no judgment, an avid comic book reader as a kid or still do, a lot of the writers of the comic books will say, they take inspiration from, human cultures, and that every culture has stories of, superhuman abilities in some fashion or other. So is that just a shared interest, story that we tell around the campfire as just natural to human beings, or was this something that was observed or has been observed from time to time? So I'll leave that as an open question, but it's very interesting. So this is considered some of those. So what are some of those? Instantaneous viewing, things in far away, ability to hear any sound anywhere, knowing the thoughts of others, the minds of others, past rebirths, future rebirths of people. So these are some of the, seeing the people's past lives. So these are, different abilities, and they manifest in different ways, but I won't belabor that portion. But that's the interesting translation, disporting in luminis. And then the final portion of that sentence, total retention, the dharani. So dharani is both a method and a skill. So dharani sometimes used interchangeably with mantra. So the idea was that through a great deal of mantra practice, one actually improved the memory. So you're able to recall more information. So one of the natural side effects of mantra recitation. So many of these are short mantras. Some are dharani, which are longer. And this is one of the things that was considered to be, especially in ancient times, a natural, what do people take now, echinacea or something? But this was considered a natural way to boost the memory, the ability to recall information. So memorizing and recitation. So remembering a text, again, is one thing. Knowing the meaning is something else. So the recitation of dharani is also a means of gaining insight into the teaching rather than just memorizing it. So that's the disporting in numinous penetrations and achieved all the dharanis, so all of the skills. So that's the second. So the third is attaining fearlessness. Here refers to 4 types of fearlessness. So again, this is a part where we don't get the detail from the English translation only. So, the 4 fearlessnesses are fearlessness in asserting that he has attained perfect enlightenment. Right. So, what if you've achieved enlightenment or think you have, but you hesitate? Is this really it? So one of the fearlessnesses that you achieve is, if asked, yes, I've achieved enlightenment. So this was the scene just after the Buddha's enlightenment. He goes back to the other 4 monks that he was meditating with, and they say, you're different. What's happened? And he's able to say, I've achieved enlightenment at this point. So there's no fear at that point because there's a level of certainty in this. So this isn't just fearlessness of I'm okay to walk down a dark alley alone. This is a fearlessness regarding, or a level of certainty regarding your attainment. So this is a concern. This is an issue. When do you know? How do you know? And so the second one is fearlessness in asserting that he has destroyed all contamination. So all of the obstacles of the mind are really gone. So you have that level of certainty or fearlessness. So maybe certainty, right, would be, if we use a legal term, moral certainty. You're very sure. There is no longer any doubt regarding where you stand spiritually. So the third one is fearlessness in showing people those elements which hinder the realization of the Dharma. So you are able to point out to people what their obstacles are without fear that you're wrong. I'm sure every counselor would want this skill, right? So there's always, if we think of psychiatry as a branch of medicine, there's always a bit of trial and error with medicine. Well, we'll start you off with this and see how that goes, and we may switch to that. And here you have immediately, this is the problem, here's the answer. So there's a fearlessness with that. But that has to come from, I think, the right perspective, not let me just get up and be applauded. Oh, that was wonderful. No, it's because you care about the outcome, right? You're invested in the outcome that you have this sort of fearlessness. So that's the third one. And then fearlessness in expounding the method of liberation. So not only what you should do, but here's actually step by step, right? I'm going to guide you along the proper road of what you need to do and how to get there. That can be very scary, right? What's the best way for me to train? What meditation should I do? Again, I think that comparison to medicine is a very apt one. Well, let's start here, see how you do, try that, versus instantly, right? No fear. This is what you need to do, step by step. So those are the 4 fearlessnesses. Yes. Too many S's in that word. And then it says, through those four fearlessnesses, he subjugated the troubling vengeance of Mara. So, in the life story of the Buddha, Mara manifests as almost like a demon, and he has these three daughters. So, this is, you can understand it literally or metaphorically, right? So, if we look at it metaphorically, these are some of the most powerful human drives, baser instincts, very strong emotions that are natural obstacles to meditative inquiry. You start meditating, you start doing spiritual practices, and you say, well, what about all those things I used to do? Do I still need to do them to be me? How does this change me? How will people see me when I come back from being on this mountaintop for 3 years or something? If I keep, doing this practice, will I still have the same friends? If I don't, what does that mean? And so the fears come up, right? A lot of things arise. Or, I used to go out every weekend and, finish off 10 kegs with my buddies, and now I don't find that to be enjoyable anymore. Am I still me? I'm not. I look at my yearbook and, hey, that guy was having fun. Who is this person? So we have those things that make trouble for us, right? So these are the Mara. So Vimalakirti here has subjugated all of those fears, concerns, those inner demons, we can say. So of course it lists 4 specific types. So 4 very specific obstacles to things that make trouble for us. So the first one is the demon of ill desires that injure one's body and mind. So the kleshas. So these are very strong attachments and emotions. Example, drinking too much. Recently legalized substances that may actually be dulling our senses slowly and not allowing us to truly enjoy life, but we think we are. So it could be a variety of different things. I think in our culture today we have a lot of extremism. Everything is, take this challenge, take that challenge. It's all very extreme. Nobody says, 3 years to a new you, or 5 years to a slimmer body. It's all very extreme, very, I know a lot of people that are doing extreme fasting, extreme juicing, very extreme diets to achieve a goal. I haven't seen any of those be very successful. They're always on to another one. So, but I think that kind of extreme thinking. And if you look at, our ancestors of not all that long ago, pre-1945-ish, what did they eat? Why were they thinner? Why did they at least appear happier? What were they doing? It wasn't very extreme. They didn't engage in extreme things. It was, moderation. So, middle way. We have something in common with our earlier century kinfolk. So that's the first one. So the second one is the demon of aggregates. So the actual physical bodily components often are obstacles. So we feel aches and pains. We get older. We need to eat. We need to defecate. And sometimes we have problems with those, or we get overly focused on one or the other, or attached to one or the other. And that becomes an obstacle to attainment. We might feel initially like, well, I spent time doing this practice. Am I actually losing time in life? Or all the different types of displeasurable experiences we can have as a result of having a body. So those things are not good or bad, they're just potentially obstacles to our realization, right? So we have a lot of, I can't do that because this or that. That's one of the first things I hear. I can't meditate because, my mind just jumps all around, I can never do it. The medical study I did recently, I heard that a lot at the beginning. I can't do that, I can't. After 8 weeks, it's wonderful, I can't live without it, I can't live without it. So it just takes a little bit of time. So, The third one is the demon of death. So we call it a demon because we don't particularly enjoy it. But the third one is death itself. Why is that considered a demon? It cuts your life short. And if you're doing a certain practice or have a goal and you don't make it there because your body stops functioning, that's an obstacle. So when do we have the most energy, focus, time, ability? When we're younger. When do most people decide they want to practice? When they get older. Because now they see, wait, the demon of death is in on the horizon, or I've had some confrontation with mortality. So if we can do more in the beginning, it's really wonderful, because we avoid a lot of problems. But sometimes we get to the opposite end where we feel rushed, or we have a new fear. And I think in many ways just the fear of that ending again, right? Natural continuum of circle of life. I'm going to sound like a Disney cartoon here in a second. That's just a natural part of it. So it's not something to be feared, but because we fear it, because we often do things out of that fear, then we term it a demon, right? It's not a cute little bunny rabbit. Those things we don't fear, but we do fear, right? Why do we even term it a demon? There's a tremendous fear. So the last one, Devaputra Mara, is, and here we go back to concepts that are unfamiliar in our Western world, but Devaputra Mara is considered a god or king of the sixth heaven of the desire realm, who tries to prevent people from doing good. So this may sound strange. Why would there be a demon in heaven? So let's do a little little comparative religion. So if we turn to the Bible and you look at the book of Job, familiar with the book of Job, where does the dialogue take place? Between God and Satan in heaven. And they're discussing Job, poor old Job down on earth. So it's not unusual to find non-defined beings in the heavenly realms and are not all wholesome. So, not a totally unusual thing. So I also find it interesting that you can find these comparisons. So if you look at Greek and Roman mythology, we have the same idea. Not all of the gods are interested in our lives and our outcome. Oh, look, they're very much trying to achieve this goal. Let's help. Some of them opposite. So now, also one of the reasons why Buddhism does not have a focus on getting to heaven. That's not the ultimate goal, because it's not ultimately the end. It's not perfect. Like as I say, open any scripture of any culture, and it's not all good in heaven. So if you're familiar with the old movie Peyton Place, sometimes it looks a lot like that, or your afternoon soap opera. So. And this time, yes, I endorse Allen Brothers coffee. So. Even though I'm drinking tea out of the cup. So the fourth description, entering into all the gates of profound Dharma, he was excellent at the perfection of wisdom. So the Dharma gates are just the methods and various teachings of the Buddha. So he's entering into all of them. So, man, that's a lot of schooling. And then not only does he know the various methods, but he actually understands all of those different teachings. So that one, the commentary very short, but Dharma gates, if we look at it that way, are just various methods, various teachings. So we can say this teaching is a Dharma gate, meditation is a Dharma gate, various types of meditations. Then Lotus Sutra announces various Dharma gates, various methods and practices. So the fifth one, having penetrated skillful means, his great vows have been accomplished. So what is the great vow? So this is the Bodhisattva vow, the vow to rescue or work for the benefit of all sentient beings. So it's considered the great vow. We may have various vows in life. Still January, we may have a New Year's resolution vow to change our lives in some way. And so that would be one vow, but not the great vow. So here's the great one, the major vow. So this is a big one though. And one of the reasons why we're even looking into the Vimalakirit Sutra is there's a lot of application for, and it's a little bit more accessible for daily living. And one of the ways we look at this is how do we even start to approach this great vow? And it doesn't mean you have to change everything about what you do, but you think, can I add 1% insight or consideration for others in everything I do? Even if that means just realizing that not everyone has the same opportunity as I have. Not everyone, is going to eat the same food or have access to the same food that I'm going to eat this evening. I could be a little bit more, have more gratitude for the cup of tea, knowing that I have it and it's good tea, and maybe someone else really wants even water and doesn't have that. So here, how do we even start looking at the vow? A lot of what gets us into trouble, both individually, societally, is thinking that our actions don't matter or don't have effects on others, or thinking that the lives of others don't actually affect us. So the more we broaden that view and see that we really are connected to everyone else, and that everyone else is really connected to us, then it starts to shift our decision making. And if we really start to make more decisions from that perspective, we act differently completely. Could you imagine? XYZ mega corporation says, let's look at all of our business practices and all of our employment practices and ask, how does it affect every person in the country, in the company, but also every person in the world? How would we change our business practices? And not for the purpose of profit, but for the purpose of let's make everyone happier. Let's make everyone, lift everyone up a little bit more. Let's really make sure that everyone in our supply chain can truly provide for their families and pay a living wage. What would that company look like? I don't know. Bankrupt. Bankrupt. That's a good answer. I think it's possible. I think it is possible. I don't want to, no company is perfect, but I do recall it's about 5 or 6 years ago, CEO of Costco said, we could make more money. We choose to pay people more. Now, every company has problems, but especially at that time, they paid more than a lot of other companies did, and that was unusual. And people were asking, well, why? And that's a choice we made. So it can be, people can make, choose to make that choice, but it is rare. You see it usually in smaller companies. And
there's actually I just read this article this week actually about one of the big, huge investment capital firms that manages hundreds of billions of dollars for most of the world's giant corporations. The CEO of that has actually come out and said they have to begin considering their social effect. That the social cost of what's going on is actually what's going to harm their business in the future.
Mhm.
Because of how millennials and the new generation of people in most first world societies are actually considering what they're doing now. It's well, actually you have to consider this now. You're going to go broke.
Yeah.
This is
No,
incredible.
it's fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible.
It's really fascinating. So, just shifting and, doing that to be more marketable. Obviously, they're a corporation. So, they're in our system, they're structured for the purpose of making money. But when you go home, look up Kyocera. Kyocera was actually focused on, has Buddhist principles as guiding corporate philosophy. And the CEO of Kyocera has been brought in to kind of save a lot of other companies. I think one of them was Japan Airlines. And they have a certain kind of way of doing things, and a lot of it's based on Buddhist philosophy. And so a lot of that has to do with how people feel in the corporation, and in a culture where just complete devotion to the company was considered the norm. Here's the company asking, how do we give back and look at the worker differently. So that's, how do we actually start to look at things on a day-to-day basis? How you answer the phone at work, how you smile at the person across the counter. All that matters. It doesn't have to be just, I have to sit down on the cushion and make this great vow until I get there. Right? It can be little by little. So finally, the sixth one, understanding the tendencies of the minds of sentient beings, he was also able to discriminate between those of sharp and dull faculties. So we don't normally, this is kind of, again,
Now he's talking about.
well, so if we go back 30, 40 years, moron was considered a medical term. Right now it's impolite. So we don't normally discuss people in terms of sharp or dull faculties. But actually, here again, we get a little bit shorted on the English because the term here, yakta in Sanskrit, has more to do with your innate ability to apprehend or comprehend religious truth, not if you're smart or dumb. It's more on how in tune to things you are. So not if you're dumb-witted or something. It's not an intellectual capacity. It's very much a
Wisdom.
innate wisdom or ability to recognize that wisdom.
Insight.
Insight capability. And sometimes that just has more to do with what we've been exposed to. I would say it's kind of very similar to like our appreciation of fine art, right? Sometimes once you learn about the making of things, you have this tremendous appreciation for it. Other people never are interested, but sometimes once they're exposed to it, they're like, oh wow, now I have a true appreciation for this. Or the opposite. When I lived in Hawaii, after a while it occurred to me, I was like, hey, wait a minute, there's not a lot of variety of architecture. Why is that? And then someone goes, well, anything new has to withstand 100-mile-an-hour winds in case there's a hurricane. Oh, I don't know. Makes a lot of things into just, brick or masonry, but yeah, you don't see a lot of, you don't see as different, if you look at the home designs right here, you don't see as much diversity of home, especially new home design there, or even new building design, because there's limitations. We're not going to get hit by 100-mile-an-hour winds here, very likely, but if you live on an island, you very well might. So then you may have, like, I had this appreciation, like, oh, I have appreciation for a lot of the variety of architecture on the mainland. So those are things that you may just not see right away. And sometimes it's just what we've been exposed to. So there's also here of, the sense ability regarding our five senses, how in tuned that we are. And again, those things can be developed. So if you grew up on, like I did, sometimes a lot of my friends, the very standard Midwestern Germanic diets, everything, a lot of food was very bland, things were boiled to a pulp. And then when I first tasted fresh vegetables, I was like, oh, these are vegetables. Then it is a completely, but without the exposure, then a lot of times you don't develop the appreciation. So that dull or sharp faculty has more to do with just not intelligence, but ability, appreciation. So if we move to the end of the paragraph, he says, long a practitioner of the path of Buddhahood, his mind was already pure, and he was definitely dedicated to the Mahayana. Here, the first portion has a lot to do with this, he was already pure, meaning purely wholesome. His actions and place from which he acted was wholesome. So this was a not, well, I know I should do X, but I really want to do Y because Y is fun. But I'll go ahead and do X because that's better. It's that conversation never happens. It's you naturally do what's pure and wholesome. So it has that connotation. And that he's definitely dedicated to the Mahayana. So not the Mahayana as opposed to Theravada or some kind of doctrinal struggle, but definitely as a spiritual practice focused on working for the benefit of all sentient beings. So it has that connotation. Sometimes that gets lost because we have a lot of scholarly literature that sets up a dichotomy of struggle between schools that isn't being actually discussed here in the text. So we're talking about Vimalakirti, and he seems great. He seems like everything's really wonderful, but really there's an implication here that he's done a tremendous amount of spiritual work in lifetimes prior, and in fact probably has attained enlightenment. If we look at the context clues of the chapter, skillful means, that coming back in this lifetime as Vimalakirti is a skillful means. Right? So here you have a very high level bodhisattva who's manifesting as Vimalakirti in order to transform beings. Not that only that Vimalakirti is this, savant of Buddha's virtues. So that's part of it. So if we go, let's see here. Let's see here. I think, where was it? So a long practitioner of the path to Buddhahood. So there's an implication here that is not in the English. So long time practitioner. So how are things practiced? There are the 4 postures. So this is what is not in the English but is in the Chinese. The 4 postures are how you practice and when you practice. So walking, standing, sitting, and lying down, that you're always in the mode of practice. So this is something that is practiced in the monastery, that you're supposed to comport yourself in a certain way, that you are always practicing the Dharma, whether you are walking, standing, sitting, or lying down. Sitting meaning sitting cross-legged or meditative posture, that you're always carrying this sort of comportment through because of your vow. So this is implied in the description of Vimalakirti. So we see this in the temple, right? We have a certain etiquette in the temple. Why? Because it's helping us to change who we are. And then when we leave, we take some of that comportment with us. So this is, in that respect, the dojo, the place of practice, is something that we take out. You see this in martial arts. You see this probably a little bit in yoga and the tea ceremony, maybe even like dance, where entering the space, there's a particular etiquette. There's etiquette while you're there, and there's an etiquette of leaving. You don't just walk in and fling your body around and do and say whatever you want and then leave. You treat the space somewhat differently. So here Vimalakirti is treating everything in all situations with that same comportment. And that's hard. That's very difficult to do for us. But if we practice little by little, then it starts to naturally invade our being. And that comes out naturally. So we start to perhaps change through actions. But this is also implying, right, whether sitting, walking, standing, sitting, or lying down, that practice can come out of physical posture. So the posture and the way we move is also important. So, is it our insight is informing our physical action, or the physical actions are informing our insight? It's both. We're working at it from both sides. So there is a purpose other than just that's the way you do it, of why we do certain things in the temple. Why do we bow? Why do we take our shoes off? Why do we provide a certain amount of respect to the space? Why do we do things here that, certain things we don't do here in this space? We don't play poker here. So certain things that you treat the space with a certain respect. Same thing, if you can slowly take that out into the world, right? There's a purpose for those things. So then the final sentence. He considered well the activities of the realms of existence, and residing in the deportment of the Buddha, his mind was great as the ocean. The Buddhas praised him as their disciple, and the Indras, Brahmas, and world lords revered him. So I talked a little bit about the deportment. So they had the deportment of the Buddha. This is constantly being in this meditative state. And then he's respected by all. Right? So it really doesn't matter your religion. Whenever people see someone else of wisdom or proper conduct, they're praised. It doesn't, no one runs up and says, well, what teaching do you follow that created that in you? Right? It doesn't even have to be that you follow any teaching. So I'm a good person. You could be a just good Confucian ethic. You could be a good filial child, and people will see that and praise it. If you go to the hospital and you see the child by the bedside of the parent, the nurses and doctors will praise that, because there will be other people there who don't have anyone, or those people don't come. So they're not going to say, well, are you Lutheran, or, well, okay, in that case I'll praise it, right? It's just the behavior itself is praiseworthy. So that's the intent here. So you even, as it's saying here, gain the respect of the gods. So again, another thing that you see through all human culture. It's not, because you accepted this teaching and you've become a wise or a good person, then you're praiseworthy. It's, that person is praiseworthy just because of their deportment, how they carry themselves, what they do. So we finished the first paragraph. A few more to go. I thought we'd get a little bit further, but we'll stop there for this evening, and we'll pick up next week with the second paragraph. Those are a little bit shorter, so we'll get a little bit further. Announcements wise, we'll have I'll send out the brief schedule that I know of for the Hawaii seminar for April soon. So if anybody's interested, just let me know. I think right now I'm leaning towards us going to Honolulu and spending some time with our sister group there, and then doing inter-island flight over to Hilo to participate, and then coming back. So we'll tour. There's 2 temples plus the Shinto shrine right there in the Hilo area, and then maybe in the evening go see volcano or something, and then participate in the seminar, and then come back. So it's only about a 40-minute flight between the islands, so it's pretty quick.
How much is the flight?
They're usually less than $100 inter-island, so it's pretty inexpensive round trip. So, yeah. So with that, thinking a little bit about the great vow that Vimalakirti has of keeping in mind all sentient beings, dedicated to merit,